Good morning, Year 5, and welcome to another maths lesson. So, as always, we're going to start with our flashback 4 questions. So, please pause the video to answer these 5 questions in your book now. So, you've got your 4 here and the bonus question here. So, please pause the video to do that now. Okay, well done, everyone. Let's have a look at the answers together. So, what is 48 times 26? So you could have used your column method for this and thought about your magic zero. And the answer is 1,248. Question 2, what is 568 divided by 4? So you could have used your bus stop method to get the answer 142. Question 3, work out the area of the rectangle. And if you think back to our area unit, to find the area we multiply the length and the width. So you should have multiplied 18 millimeters by 7 millimeters to get the answer of 126 millimeters squared. And remember, when we find the area, you need the squared after your units in your answer. Question 4, how many lines of symmetry does a rectangle have? And the answer to that question is 2, because you can fold a rectangle directly in half 2 times, and each fold will have an equal shape. Okay, and our bonus question, what is the answer? What time is it, and can you say it in another way? So our little hand is in between the 10 and the 11, and our big hand here is on the 18th minute. So that means our time is 10:18, and we say 18 minutes past 10. And well done if you thought of any other ways to say that. Okay, so what I want you to do is pause the video now and mark your answers in a different coloured pen, putting a tick or a dot depending on whether you got it right or wrong. So pause the video to do that now. Okay, Year 5. So today we're going to be starting a new unit and it's called Position and Direction. And before we look at what we're going to learn about, I want you to pause the video and write the date in yellow. So the date is the 1st of the 2nd, 21, and the LO is to describe positions on a graph. So pause the video and write that nice and neatly in your maths book for me now. Okay, thank you everyone. So quickly look at the signs of success for today's lesson to know how to be successful. And once you've done that, could you have a look at the vocabulary we've got on the screen? And like when we start any new unit, we look at all the vocabulary needed to learn about this new unit. So what I want you to do is pause the video and just have a think if you know these words and you think you know what they mean. So pause the video to do that now, please. Okay, so there might be some that you remember from previous years at school, or there might be some you've not seen before. So what we're going to do now is have a look at these words in more detail, look at their definitions, okay? So on my page here, I have our first definition, which is vertex or vertices, which is the same word, but vertices means more than one vertex. So vertices are the points of where 2 or more lines or edges meet on a shape. So if you think of a square, that corner where the 2 lines meet is called the vertex, and that is the mathematical term for corner of a shape. So make sure you use the word vertex or vertices opposed to the word corner. Okay, what have we got next? We've got the word reflect. And you might know what the word reflect means, but when we think of maths and reflecting shapes, when you reflect a shape in maths, you present the shape in mirror image. A mirror image means it looks exactly the same when you've reflected it. Okay, and now we've got 2 more definitions to look at here. So we've got line of symmetry and mirror line. So firstly, the amount of lines of symmetry a shape has is dependent on how many times it can be cut in half. So if you look at this square here, it has 4 lines of symmetry, because if we cut a square in half 4 times, each part would look the same. Or if we folded a square, each fold would look exactly the same, okay? So you can see it goes across, down, and across. Okay, and then we've got mirror line. So in order to reflect a shape accurately, you need to make sure you use the mirror line. So that means that you don't reflect it from here, but you use the mirror line. So when the shape is reflected, it's exactly the same. It's precise and accurate. So that is what a mirror line is. And maybe when you've done some reflection in school before, you've used a mirror and you've put it on a paper, and then you can see what the shape looks like in the mirror. So it's reflection. So you might have looked at the mirror line before in maths with shape. Okay, and now onto our next page of definitions. So here we have coordinates. And coordinates are a set of numbers that show an exact position on a graph. So for example, a coordinate here is 1,7. And that is what coordinates look like. Let's have a look at our next definition. Okay, so we've got point. And a coordinate identifies a point on a graph. So if we have a look at this graph here, this here is a point. And from this point, you can find a coordinate by looking at the scale. But we'll have a look at that in more detail later on. Okay, and we've got quadrant. So a quadrant of a graph is the section that is 1/4 of a graph. So this here is our first quadrant. And the graph has 4 of these, so it would go that way and down here as well, and it would have some minus numbers. However, in year 5, we're just going to look at the first quadrant, which looks like this. So it has 0 to 10, for example, and the same on the bottom. And a graph, our last definition on this page, a graph is a diagram that represents data in an organised way like this. And before we move on, I've got a quick question for you, which is here. Can you label the correct X and Y axis on the graph, which is something really important for this unit of position and direction? So pause the video and have a think about which one's the X and which one's the Y. So pause the video to have a little think about that. Okay, let's have a look. So this here is the X axis, and that means this one is the Y axis. So well done if you remembered that from previous units and got that correct. And if you didn't, familiarise yourself now with the X and the Y axis. And what I've done for our unit of maths to help us remember is I've put the X and the Y up here because we read the X axis, then the Y axis. So just as you go through the flip charts, you'll see this here to help us remember. Okay, now on to our last page of definitions. So firstly, we have translate. So when you translate a shape on a graph, it either moves up, down, left or right. And it's important that you know that it does not change the appearance of the shape, just the position. So the size of the shape and what it looks like stays the same, but it moves around on the graph. It's translated, and you'll be doing a bit of that in this unit. Okay, next we have parallel. So some of you might remember this from previous years. A shape is parallel if its sides will never intersect, which means touch. So if I look at this shape here, the lines at the top and the bottom will never touch because they'll just keep going. They will not intersect. And it's the same for the ones on the side here. So I've done my arrows to show that they'll just keep going and not intersect. Okay, and figure. So sometimes in this unit of maths, you might be asked to complete a figure on a graph, and that means a figure can also be described as a shape. So you'd be completing the shape on the graph. Okay, and this picture here just shows a square that's been translated 8 places to the right. So as you can see, it hasn't changed the appearance, just the position on the graph. So that links back to our first definition. And I've just remembered that I didn't read out the one plot. So a plot on a graph is how we represent data by drawing a dot. So this here is a plot. And I just want you to remember, when you do this by yourselves eventually, it needs to be a small dot or a cross, nothing big. So that is a plot. Okay, year 5, so now we've looked at all of these definitions. I just want you to pause the video again and think about what you now know about these words. Are you able to define them? And if you can't remember, just have a look back at the definitions on the video. So pause the video and have a little think about what these words mean to you now. Okay, now we're going to move on to the main input. So we're going to look at the step 1 explore phase, and this looks at coordinates in particular. So I've got a question for you, but you might not know the answer yet because we haven't been taught it. So I'm going to ask you the question anyway for you to think about, and then I'll model how we find a coordinate. So my first question for you is, how do we find the coordinates of point A? So we've got some different coordinates on the map of the world, and I want you to find the coordinates of point A, or think about how you might do that. So pause the video if you need to, and just think about how we find the coordinates of point A. Okay, so an important piece of information for this entire unit is that we find the x-axis first and then the y-axis. So what we do is we start at our 0, we always start at the 0, and we go along until our number on the scale meets our point on the graph. So I'm going to go along and see what my x coordinate of point A is. So I'm going to go along, and I'm going to stop at number 1 because our point A is in line with the number 1 on the x-axis. So that means I can fill in the first part of my coordinate, which is 1. And then we need to find the y-axis, which goes in our second part of our coordinate. So I found the 1, and now what I need to do is go up the y-axis and find what number my point is in line with. So I'm just going to go up until I meet my point, like so. And I'm going to stop here and see what number my point A is in line with, which is the number 8. So now I can fill in my second part of my coordinates, which is the number 8. So point A has the coordinates of 1, 8. I know this because if I start on the x-axis, I find the number 1 in line with my point A. And if I go up the y-axis, my point is in line with the number 8. So it has the coordinates of 1, 8. And this is how we write our coordinates. We use brackets, put our first x-axis number, then a comma, and then our y-axis number, and then close the bracket. So well done if you remembered how to find some coordinates. And if not, just have a look at what we've done and see if you can jog your memory. Okay, so now that I've modelled how we find a coordinate on a graph, I'd like you to have a go. So my question to you is, what is the coordinate of point E? And remember, I've got a little reminder up here that we find the x-axis first and then the y-axis, and this is how we represent our coordinates. So pause the video and try and find the coordinate of point E, and you can use your fingers to help you on the screen if you need to. So pause the video to do that now. Okay, let's have a look together and see if you got it correct then. So again, I'm going to start at my 0 and I'm going to find my x-axis coordinate first. So I'm going to go along to point E and see what number it's in line with, which is the number 9. So I'm going to fill out the first part of my coordinate, start back at my number 9 and then look at my y-axis. So I'm going to go up and see what number my point E is in line with. So I'm going to go up, and that meets the number 1, as you can see here. So that is my second part of the coordinate. So now I know the coordinate of point E is 9, 1, and I know this because if I go along the x-axis, I find the number 9, and up the y-axis is the number 1. So it has the coordinates 9, 1. So well done if you got that correct. And if you got 1, 9, that's because you found the y-axis first and not the x-axis, which is a common misconception. So make sure you find the x-axis first and then the y-axis. Okay, year 5, I've got another question for you. And my question is, when we find the coordinates of point C, so this point here, do we say 6, 8 or 8, 6 for our coordinates? So pause the video and have a little think about which one it is. Is it 6, 8 or 8, 6? So pause the video to do that now. Okay, our correct coordinates for point C are 6, 8. And I know this because if I go along my x-axis, which we start with always, I come to the number 6, which is in line with my point C. And then I'm going to find my y-axis number. So I'm going to go up and see that it's in line with the number 8. So the correct coordinates are therefore 6, 8, not 8, 6. Okay? So well done if you got that correct. And if you didn't, just remember that you need to find the x-axis first and then the y-axis. So well done if you got that correct. Okay, so that is our step 1 input over. So therefore I've put the step 1 worksheet, and this is just 1A on the screen now. So what you need to do is pause the video using the same grid and label the coordinates of each location. So pause the video to complete 1A of the worksheet now. Okay, now on to 1B of the step 1. So pause the video to complete 1B of the step 1 worksheet. Okay, now on to the step 2 and 3 explore phase. So I've got a problem for you on the screen that I'd like you to help me solve. So it says the digits in a pair of coordinates add to make 6. What could the coordinates be? So we need to think about what coordinates we could have that add together to make the number 6. And remember, our x-axis still needs to come before our y-axis. So pause the video and have a little think, and then I'll model how we answer this type of question. Okay, so now I'm going to model how we answer this type of question. So if I think that the coordinates need to add together to make 6, the first thing I'm going to think of is 0 and 6. So if my 0 is on the x-axis, it will be here, and then I need to go up to my 6 on the y-axis to make my first plot. And then these two add together to make 6 because we've got 0 and 6 as our coordinates. Okay, so now I'm going to go along to the number 1 and think what I can add to number 1 to make 6. So I know that 6 minus 1 is 5, so I'm going to use the x-axis coordinate number 1 and use the y-axis number 5. Because then if I think 1 add 5 is 6, I know that is correct. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to the number 2 on the x-axis. So I know that 2 add 4 is 6, so I'm going to use my 2 x-axis and go up to the 4 on the y-axis to make sure that those numbers add to 6. Okay, now I'm going to move on to number 3, and I know straight away that 3 add 3 is 6. So I'm going to go along to my 3 on the x-axis and up to my 3 on the y-axis and make my plot. Okay, and now I'm going to move on to number 4 on the x-axis, and I've already done 4 add 2 here, so I'm going to do the same here. So I'm going to use my 4 on the x-axis and go up to the 2 on the y-axis because 4 add 2 is 6. And now I'm going to go across to my 5, and again I know 5 add 1 is 6, so I'm going to use the 5 on the x-axis and the 1 on the y-axis. And lastly, I'm going to move on to the number 6, and I know that I can't add anything more to 6 to make 6, so it has to be 0. So my x-axis is 6 and my y-axis is 0, so I'm going to make my plot here. So as you can see, although I've got some numbers repeating, like 3 and 3, 4 here and 4 here, the coordinates are different. Okay, so I've now put my coordinates next to my plot to help you visualize these numbers adding together to make 6. So we've got our 0 and 6, our 1 and our 5, our 2 and our 4, our 3 and our 3, 4 and 2, 5 and 1, and 6 and 0. And you notice that these switch around as we go along the x-axis and up the y-axis. And what else have you noticed about my plots on my graph? What does it look like? So it's going down, isn't it? It's decreasing. And as my x-axis goes up, my y-axis goes down. So well done if you got any of these correct, and then we'll have a look at having a go in a second on another one. So this time, I want you to have a go at putting your coordinates on a graph to add together to make 10. So like we've done here with the number 6, you need to do the same with the number 10. So you could either write these coordinates in your book, what you think will add together, or you could draw this graph in your book and plot the points and label them. So pause the video to just have a little think about this now, or have a go in your books. So well done everyone for having a go at that. I've now put on the screen the answers to that problem. So as you can see again, it's decreasing in this line, and as my x-axis goes up, my y-axis goes down. And this is when your addition facts really help. The numbers you know add together to make 10. And also remember that the x-axis still comes first. So we've got our 0 and our 10, our 1 and 9. Okay, so you can see the pattern, and you can see that the x-axis is always first. So well done if you got that correct. And if not, have a look at where you went wrong. Okay, year 5, so we've got another problem now about the order of coordinates. So Tom says, I think the coordinates of point B are 2, 9. Lisa says, I think the coordinates of B are 9, 2. And Lily says, I think you are both correct. And I want you to figure out who is correct. Is it Tom, Lisa, or Lily? So pause the video and think about the coordinates of point B on the graph, this one here. Is it 2, 9 or 9, 2? Okay, so Tom is the person who is correct because, as always, our x-axis coordinate comes first. And if we look at point B and start on our 0, if we go along, it meets the number 2 on the x-axis, so our 2 comes first. And then it meets the number 9 on the y-axis, so our 9 comes second. And Tom said the coordinates are 2, 9, so Tom is correct. So well done if you got that correct. Okay, I've got one more question for you before you move on to your worksheets for today. So, having a look at our graph here, which plot's x-axis is greater? Which is bigger? Is it the plot A or F? So we're looking at the x-axis and seeing which one is greater. So pause the video and have a little look at the graph, at the plots A and F, and decide which plot has the greater x-axis. Okay, so plot F has the greater x-axis, and I know this because if I start at my 0 and go along my x-axis, 1 is on the number 1, A is on the number 1, and F is on the number 3. So the x-axis of A is 1 and F is 3. So 3 is greater than 1, so F has the greater x-axis. So well done if you got that correct. It was a bit of a tricky one. Okay, year 5, here is the step 2 question 2A. So what you need to do is read the question, and they're looking at the pentagon on the graph and figuring out who is correct about its coordinates, Dora, Tommy, or Eva. So answer the question in a full sentence and explain how you know this. Okay, so on to step 2, questions 2B, and this is similar to the one we did in the input, so you need to add the coordinates together to make the number 8. Okay, here are the step 3 questions. And here is the extension question. Okay, year 5, well done for completing your independent work. Well done, it's the first lesson, so I understand it might be a bit tricky. Here are the step 1 answers, so pause the video to mark your work in a different coloured pen. Okay, here are the step 2 answers. So pause the video to mark your work in a different coloured pen and make sure these are in the correct order with the correct coordinates. So the x-axis first and then the y-axis. Okay, here are the step 3 answers. And here is the extension answer. And once you finish marking all of your work, could you please write a learning comment in a different coloured pen so I know how we got on with our first lesson on position and direction. Okay, Year 5, thanks for all your hard work today. I hope you've enjoyed doing something a bit different with graphs and coordinates. And I'll see you again soon for another math lesson. Have a lovely rest of your day. Bye.